There is a photograph that most people have seen, even if they cannot quite remember where they first encountered it. A little girl with blonde hair, styled and sprayed into elaborate curls that frame a face far too young for the makeup she wears. Her eyes are bright, her smile practiced. She is dressed in a costume that sparkles under stage lights. The image has become iconic, reproduced in newspapers and magazines and television programs so many times over the past 3 decades that it has taken on a life of its own, separate from the child it depicts. But before that photograph became a symbol of something dark and unresolved, it was simply a picture of a 6-year-old named JonBenét Patricia Ramsey, a kindergartner from Boulder, Colorado, who liked to perform and who, by all accounts, enjoyed the attention that came with standing in the spotlight. The photograph matters because it shaped the way the world would come to understand what happened to this child. And it matters because it can also obscure the reality of who she actually was. Before the headlines, before the endless speculation, before her name became synonymous with unsolved tragedy, JonBenét was simply a little girl living an ordinary life in an extraordinary house in one of America's most beautiful small cities. There is a particular quality to winter mornings in Boulder, Colorado, a stillness that settles over the foothills of the Rocky Mountains like a held breath. The air is thin at that elevation, crisp and clean, and on the clearest days you can see for miles across the high plains to the east, while the snow-capped peaks rise behind you to the west. It is a college town, home to the University of Colorado, but it is also a place where families have long been drawn by the promise of good schools, safe neighborhoods, and a quality of life that feels distinctly removed from the chaos of larger cities. In December of 1996, the population hovered around 90,000 people, and violent crime was something that happened elsewhere, in Denver perhaps, or in the troubled urban centers that occasionally made the evening news. Boulder was not that kind of place. Boulder was the kind of town where children rode their bicycles to school, where neighbors knew each other's names, where the most pressing concerns tended to involve traffic on Canyon Boulevard or debates about growth and development. It was a place where people felt safe, leaving their doors unlocked. The Ramsey family had moved to Boulder several years earlier, drawn by the opportunities that the region offered. John Ramsey was a successful businessman, the president of Access Graphics, a computer services company that had grown substantially under his leadership. He was a self-made man in many ways, a native of Nebraska who had built his career through intelligence and determination. By 1996, Access Graphics was generating revenues approaching $1 billion annually, and John Ramsey had become a prominent figure in Boulder's business community. His wife, Patricia, whom everyone called Patsy, had been Miss West Virginia in 1977, and she brought a certain Southern charm to their Colorado life. The couple had met in Atlanta, married, and together they were raising 2 children in their sprawling Tudor-style home on 15th Street, a house that sat in one of Boulder's most desirable neighborhoods, just blocks from the university campus. The house itself was substantial, a 3-story structure of red brick with a steeply pitched roof and ivy climbing its walls. It had been built in the early part of the 20th century and retained much of its original character, with hardwood floors and leaded glass windows and the kind of architectural details that speak to an earlier era of craftsmanship. The Ramseys had purchased the home in 1991 and had invested considerable effort in making it their own. There were 15 rooms spread across nearly 7,000 square feet, including a finished basement that housed a wine cellar and storage areas, and a small room that the family used for various purposes. It was by any measure an impressive residence. the kind of home that announced its owner's success while still maintaining the understated elegance that Boulder's culture demanded. JonBenét Patricia Ramsey was 6 years old in December of 1996, and she was, by all accounts, a child of unusual presence. She had been named for her father, JonBenét, with a French twist that her mother had chosen. And from an early age, she had displayed the kind of poise and charm that drew attention wherever she went. Patsy Ramsey, perhaps drawing on her own experience as a pageant competitor, had introduced her daughter to the world of children's beauty pageants, and JonBenét had taken to it with enthusiasm. She had won several titles, including Little Miss Colorado and Colorado State All-Star Kids Cover Girl, and her photographs from these competitions show a child who seemed genuinely comfortable in the spotlight, a little girl with blonde hair and a wide smile who appeared to enjoy the costumes and performances and the attention that came with them. Yet those who knew JonBenét beyond the pageant stage described a child who was in many ways quite ordinary. She attended High Peaks Elementary School, where she was a kindergartner known for her friendliness and curiosity. She had friends in the neighborhood, children with whom she played and laughed and did all the things that 6-year-olds do. She loved her older brother Burke, who was 9 at the time, and the two shared the typical sibling relationship of squabbles and alliances and private jokes. She had a dog, and she was learning to ride a bicycle. And she was excited about Christmas in the way that all children are excited about Christmas, with that particular intensity that belongs only to the young. In the days leading up to that final Christmas, the Ramsey household was busy with the preparations and celebrations that the season demanded. Patsy Ramsey was known for her elaborate decorations and her commitment to making the holidays special, and the house on 15th Street was transformed into a showcase of Christmas spirit. There were trees in multiple rooms, lights strung throughout, the accumulated ornaments and traditions of a family that took the season seriously. On Christmas Day, the family attended a party at the home of family friends, the Whites, where they had dinner and exchanged gifts and spent the evening in the company of others who moved in Boulder's social circles. They returned home late that Christmas night, sometime around 9 or 9:30 in the evening. Burke was tired, as children often are, after the excitement of Christmas Day, and he went to bed without much protest. JonBenét had fallen asleep in the car during the short drive home, and John Ramsey carried her up to her bedroom on the second floor, still in her clothes from the party. Patsy helped get her daughter changed into pajamas and tucked her into bed. It was a scene of ordinary domestic routine, a family settling in after a long day of celebration, with no indication that anything was amiss. The Ramseys had plans to fly to Michigan the following morning, December 26th, to spend additional time with family at their vacation home in Charlevoix. Their bags were packed, the early morning departure arranged, and the family went to sleep, anticipating another day of holiday enjoyment. What happened in the hours between that ordinary Christmas night and the following morning remains nearly 3 decades later the subject of intense speculation and investigation. The facts of what was discovered, however, are a matter of public record, documented in police reports and court filings, and the countless journalistic accounts that have examined this case from every conceivable angle. Patsy Ramsey rose early on the morning of December 26th. The household was quiet, the rest of the family still asleep. She came down the back spiral staircase that led from the upper floors to the kitchen, intending to make coffee and begin the preparations for their morning flight. On one of the steps of that staircase, she found 3 sheets of paper, handwritten, that would set in motion events that continue to reverberate to this day. The note was addressed to Mr. Ramsey and claimed to be from a group identifying itself as a small foreign faction. It demanded $118,000 for the safe return of JonBenét, a figure that happened to match almost exactly the amount of the Christmas bonus John Ramsey had received from his company that year. The note was rambling and strange, filled with movie-like language and dire warnings, instructions about how the ransom should be delivered, and threats about what would happen if the family contacted police or failed to comply. It was written on paper that appeared to have come from a legal pad in the Ramsey home, using a pen that was also found in the house. The ransom note would become one of the most analyzed documents in criminal history. At nearly 3 pages and over 300 words, it was extraordinarily long for such a communication. Typical ransom demands are brief and to the point, conveying the essential information about how much money is required and how to deliver it. This note was different. It read almost like a screenplay, with theatrical language about the kidnappers representing a foreign faction who respected John Ramsey's business, but not his country. It warned against contacting police or the FBI, threatened beheading if the family tried to outsmart the group, and made reference to John Ramsey's need to be well rested for the ransom delivery. The note concluded with the words, "Victory and S.B.T.C." The meaning of this acronym has never been determined, though numerous theories have been proposed over the years. Some investigators believed it was a meaningless addition designed to throw off the investigation. Others thought it might be an abbreviation for Saved by the Cross or some other religious or organizational reference. Like so many elements of this case, it remains a puzzle without a solution. Handwriting experts who examined the note reached varying conclusions. Some eliminated John Ramsey as the author. None could definitively exclude Patsy Ramsey, though none could positively identify her as the writer either. The note contained what appeared to be practice starts on a separate page, suggesting that whoever wrote it had taken multiple attempts to get the wording right. This detail suggested premeditation, planning, and an author who had time to compose the message carefully, rather than someone writing in the immediate aftermath of a crime. Anyone who has ever received devastating news knows that time seems to fracture in those moments, that the ordinary sequence of cause and effect becomes something else entirely, something that the mind struggles to process. Patsy Ramsey, upon reading that note, upon comprehending that her daughter had supposedly been taken from her bed in the night, she screamed for her husband. She ran up the stairs to check JonBenét's bedroom, finding it empty, the bed disturbed, her daughter gone. And then at 5:52 in the morning, she called 911. The recording of that call would later become one of the most analyzed pieces of audio in criminal history, parsed by experts and amateurs alike for any clue it might contain about Patsy Ramsey's state of mind, about what she knew or did not know, about whether her panic was genuine or performed. What is beyond dispute is that she was hysterical, that she was crying, that she told the dispatcher that her daughter had been kidnapped and that a ransom note had been left. The Boulder Police Department responded to the call. By 6 in the morning, uniformed officers were at the house, beginning what should have been a methodical investigation of a potential kidnapping. But from those earliest moments, the handling of the case was marked by decisions and circumstances that would later be criticized as catastrophic failures of procedure. Officer Rick French was the first to arrive, and within minutes, he was faced with a scene unlike anything he had encountered in his years on the Boulder force. Here was a distraught mother, a strange ransom note, a missing child, and a house so large and labyrinthine that a thorough search would take hours. French made a cursory check of the home, including a brief look into the basement. But he did not open the door to the small room where JonBenét's body lay. The door was latched from the outside, and in the darkness and confusion of those early morning hours, he apparently decided it was a storage area, not worth investigating. This decision would haunt the investigation for decades. The crime scene was not secured in the manner that best practices would have demanded. Friends and family began arriving at the house, called by Patsy in her distress, inadvertently compromising whatever evidence might have been present. The house was large and complex, and a thorough search was not immediately conducted. The ransom note had specified that the kidnappers would call between 8 and 10 in the morning with further instructions. Those hours passed with no call. The deadline came and went, and the phone remained silent. John Ramsey, who had been largely passive in the early morning hours, grew increasingly agitated as the promised contact failed to materialize. It was early in the afternoon, approximately 1 o'clock, when Detective Linda Arndt, who had been assigned to the case, suggested that John Ramsey and a family friend, Fleet White, conduct another search of the house. Perhaps she hoped that a more thorough examination might yield some clue about what had happened, some indication of where JonBenét might be, or how she had been taken. Perhaps she was simply trying to give the anxious father something to do while they waited for developments that seemed increasingly unlikely to come. John Ramsey and Fleet White went to the basement. They checked the storage areas, the rooms that had not been carefully examined earlier in the day. The basement of the Ramsey home was a warren of small rooms and storage spaces, poorly lit and cluttered with the accumulated possessions of a family that had lived in the house for years. There was a boiler room, storage closets, a wine cellar, and the small room at the end of a narrow hallway that the family sometimes called the train room because Burke had played with model trains there. John Ramsey opened the door to this small room, which required lifting a wooden latch that held it closed from the outside. The room had no windows and was lit only by a single bare bulb. In the darkness, he reached for the light switch. JonBenét was there. She was lying on the floor, her arms raised above her head, her mouth covered with duct tape, a white blanket partially covering her body. A cord was wrapped around her neck, attached to a broken paintbrush handle in a configuration that resembled a garrote. Her wrists were bound with the same type of cord. She was not moving. She was not breathing. The sequence of events that followed would later be scrutinized intensely. John Ramsey lifted his daughter's body and carried her upstairs into the main part of the house, crying out that she had been found. Fleet White, who had been searching with him, reached for the duct tape covering JonBenét's mouth. The act was understandable from a father's perspective, the instinct to hold his child, to bring her out of that dark basement room. But from an investigative standpoint, it was another breach of protocol, another disruption of a crime scene that had already been compromised beyond measure. Detective Arndt was alone in the house at that point, the only officer present among a crowd of friends and family. She later described the moment as one of the most disturbing of her career, the sight of John Ramsey appearing with his daughter's body. The sudden transformation of a kidnapping investigation into a homicide case, the realization that she was standing in the middle of a crime scene that had been irreparably damaged. The subsequent autopsy would reveal the extent of what had been done to JonBenét in her final hours. She had been struck on the head with tremendous force, resulting in an 8.5-inch fracture to her skull. The blow was so severe that it had caused hemorrhaging in the brain, suggesting to some experts that JonBenét may have already been unconscious or near death when the blow was delivered. She had been strangled with the cord that was found around her neck, which was tied in a specific configuration, using a broken paintbrush handle that created a tourniquet effect. There was evidence of prior vaginal trauma. though the exact nature and timing of this injury would become a subject of considerable dispute among experts. Some believed it indicated chronic abuse, predating the night of her death. The official cause of death was listed as asphyxiation by strangulation, associated with craniocerebral trauma. The medical examiner noted abrasions on her body, petechial hemorrhaging in her eyes, consistent with strangulation, and other physical evidence that told the story of a violent end to a young life. The forensic evidence collected at the scene would become both crucial and controversial as the investigation progressed. Fibers consistent with the materials of Patsy Ramsey's jacket were found on the duct tape that had covered JonBenét's mouth. A flashlight found on the kitchen counter was identified as a possible weapon consistent with the skull fracture. Though this theory was never definitively proven, the cord used in the garrote and to bind JonBenét's wrists was not traced to any source within the house. Small towns have long memories, and Boulder, despite its growth and sophistication, retains something of that small-town character. In December of 1996, when news of JonBenét's death spread through the community, it was met with a shock that seemed to penetrate every household. This was not supposed to happen in Boulder. Children were not supposed to be murdered in their own homes on Christmas night. The fundamental assumptions that people had made about their safety, about the safety of their families, were suddenly and violently called into question. The investigation that followed would become one of the most scrutinized, criticized, and debated in American criminal history. From the very first days, there were tensions between the police department and the district attorney's office about how the case should be handled. The Boulder Police Department had limited experience with homicide investigations. Having dealt with only a handful of murders in the years leading up to JonBenét's death, the detectives assigned to the case were capable professionals, but they were operating in unfamiliar territory, dealing with a crime that was beyond their previous experience and that attracted a level of media attention that was unprecedented in the town's history. The national media descended on Boulder within days of the murder, drawn by the strange and compelling elements of the case. There was the beautiful child, the beauty pageant photographs, the wealthy family, the mysterious ransom note, the baffling circumstances of the crime. Television crews set up camp outside the Ramsey home and the police station. Tabloid reporters competed for any scrap of information, any new angle, any hint of scandal. The case became a national obsession, discussed on every talk show and news program, analyzed by self-appointed experts who offered theories ranging from the plausible to the absurd. The tabloid coverage was particularly intense. Publications competed to secure exclusive photographs, interviews with anyone connected to the family, and increasingly salacious speculation about what might have happened inside that Boulder home. The pageant photographs of JonBenét were reproduced endlessly. Some critics argued that the media coverage itself was a form of exploitation, turning a murdered child into entertainment and her family into characters in a real-life soap opera. The citizens of Boulder found themselves at the center of this media storm. Their quiet university town suddenly synonymous with a crime that shocked the nation. Local businesses became accustomed to camera crews. Neighbors were approached repeatedly for interviews. The simple act of living near the Ramsey home became newsworthy, and residents who had never sought the spotlight found themselves reluctantly drawn into it. Anyone who lived through the late 1990 seconds remembers the intensity of cable news coverage in that era. The networks had discovered that crime stories could drive ratings, and the JonBenét case had all the elements that made for compelling television. There was mystery, there was wealth, there was the uncomfortable spectacle of child beauty pageants, and there was the tantalizing possibility that the killer might be someone inside the family. For months and then years, the case dominated coverage, spawning books and television specials. From the beginning, investigators were faced with a central question that would define the entire case. Was this crime committed by someone inside the Ramsey household, or by an intruder who had entered the home from outside? The evidence pointed in both directions, creating a puzzle that has never been satisfactorily resolved. Those who believed in the intruder theory pointed to several factors. There was evidence of a possible entry point through a basement window that had been broken months earlier and never properly repaired. John Ramsey himself had broken the window the previous summer when he had locked himself out of the house, and the repair had been delayed. Investigators found a suitcase positioned beneath this window, potentially as a step for someone climbing in or out. Disturbed debris around the window sill suggested recent activity, though whether this activity occurred on the night of the murder or at some earlier time could not be definitively determined. There were unidentified fingerprints found in various locations around the house, including on the ransom note itself. A palm print on the door of the basement room where JonBenét was found did not match any member of the Ramsey family and remains unidentified to this day. Footprints in the basement, potentially from a high-tech brand boot, were photographed but never matched to any known individual. These traces of an unknown presence troubled those who believed the family must be responsible, suggesting that someone else had indeed been in the house. Most significantly, DNA evidence recovered from JonBenét's underwear and from under her fingernails did not match any member of the Ramsey family. This unknown male DNA profile would become a crucial piece of evidence, analyzed and reanalyzed as technology improved, and ultimately used by prosecutors in 2008 to formally clear the Ramseys of any involvement in their daughter's death. The presence of this DNA, deposited in locations consistent with contact during the commission of the crime, formed the cornerstone of the argument that an intruder had killed JonBenét. Lou Smith, the retired detective who would become the most prominent advocate for the intruder theory, documented additional evidence that he believed pointed to an outside perpetrator. He noted that a neighbor's dog had barked persistently on the night of the murder. He examined the ransom note and concluded that its very length and strangeness suggested it was written by someone unfamiliar with the family, someone who had taken information from publicly available sources and woven it into a bizarre kidnapping narrative. He believed that a perpetrator could have entered through the basement window, hidden in the house during the family's Christmas party absence, and then attacked JonBenét during the night, before fleeing through the same route. Those who suspected the family pointed to equally compelling evidence. The ransom note was written on paper from inside the house, with a pen from inside the house, and it made reference to the exact amount of John Ramsey's Christmas bonus, information that would presumably be known only to someone with intimate knowledge of the family's finances. The note was unusually long, running to nearly 3 pages, far longer than typical ransom demands, and it contained language and phrasing that some analysts believed matched Patsy Ramsey's writing style. The fact that JonBenét's body was never removed from the house suggested that whatever ransom scenario the note described had never been the actual plan, raising questions about why such a note would have been written at all. Investigators found it difficult to explain how an intruder could have committed this crime without leaving more evidence of forced entry, without being detected by the family sleeping upstairs, and without being observed by neighbors in a residential area where people were generally attentive to unusual activity. The murder appeared to have taken place over an extended period of time, with evidence suggesting that JonBenét had remained alive for some time. between the head injury and the strangulation. The scene in the basement seemed inconsistent with a kidnapping that had simply gone wrong and more consistent with something else. The question of prior sexual abuse added another layer of complexity. Some medical experts who examined the evidence believed that JonBenét had experienced vaginal trauma before the night of her death, raising the disturbing possibility that she had been abused over time by someone with regular access to her. Other experts disputed this interpretation, arguing that the physical findings were consistent with a single assault on the night of the murder. The disagreement among professionals left this crucial question unresolved. The behavior of the family in the aftermath of the discovery also drew scrutiny. The Ramseys hired lawyers almost immediately and retained a public relations firm to manage their media interactions. They gave interviews to national television programs before they sat down for formal interviews with Boulder police, a sequence that investigators found suspicious. When they did speak with police, their accounts contained inconsistencies and gaps that investigators struggled to resolve. But behavior in the aftermath of trauma is notoriously difficult to interpret. Grief takes many forms, and the assumption that innocent people will behave in certain predictable ways has led to wrongful convictions throughout the history of criminal justice. The Ramseys maintained their innocence consistently and emphatically, insisting that they had nothing to do with their daughter's death, and that police were wasting valuable time and resources by focusing on them instead of searching for the real killer. In the months following the murder, investigators developed what came to be known as the case against the Ramseys. They believed that something had happened that night, perhaps an accident, perhaps a moment of rage, that had resulted in JonBenét's death, and that the parents had staged the scene to make it look like a kidnapping gone wrong. The ransom note in this theory was a piece of misdirection, designed to point investigators toward phantom foreign terrorists rather than toward the people who lived in the house. The sexual assault evidence was explained as part of the staging, an attempt to make the crime look like the work of a predator rather than a family member. But the case was never strong enough to bring charges. The grand jury that convened in 1998 heard evidence for more than a year, examining witnesses, reviewing forensic evidence, and listening to expert testimony about every aspect of the case. The jurors were ordinary citizens of Boulder County, tasked with determining whether there was probable cause to believe that a crime had been committed and that specific individuals should be charged. For 13 months they met, deliberated, and ultimately voted to indict Jon and Patsy Ramsey on charges related to child abuse, resulting in death and being accessories to a crime. The indictment they approved was a complicated document that stopped short of accusing the Ramseys of directly killing their daughter. Instead, it alleged that they had knowingly placed JonBenét in a situation that resulted in her death, and that they had helped someone else who committed the murder. The language was carefully chosen, reflecting the jury's apparent uncertainty about exactly what had happened, while expressing their belief that the parents bore some responsibility. However, District Attorney Alex Hunter made the decision not to sign the indictment, concluding that there was insufficient evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. This decision was controversial at the time and remains controversial today, with critics arguing that Hunter lacked the courage to pursue a difficult prosecution and supporters contending that he properly recognized the weaknesses in the case against the family. Hunter was facing the end of a long career, and some suggested that he simply did not want to take on a case that might well result in acquittal and damage his legacy. The existence of the grand jury indictment was not publicly known for many years, kept secret under Colorado law. It was only in 2013, through legal proceedings initiated by news organizations, that the documents were finally released, revealing for the first time that the grand jury had believed there was probable cause to charge the Ramseys. By then, Patsy Ramsey had been dead for 7 years, having succumbed to ovarian cancer in 2006, and the question of whether she had been involved in her daughter's death had become one that could never be answered through the criminal justice system. John Ramsey has lived with the aftermath of the 26th of December, 1996, for nearly 3 decades now. He has remarried, has continued to run businesses, but he has never stopped pushing for answers, never stopped advocating for continued investigation, never stopped insisting that an intruder killed his daughter and that the real perpetrator remains unidentified. In the years following the murder, several suspects were investigated with varying degrees of seriousness. The list of people examined by investigators ran into the hundreds, and the investigation touched individuals across the country and around the world. Gary Oliva, a convicted sex offender who lived in Boulder at the time, became a person of interest after it was discovered that he had a photograph of JonBenét in his possession when he was arrested on unrelated charges years later. Oliva had a history of crimes against children and had been living within walking distance of the Ramsey home in December 1996. He reportedly became obsessed with the case and wrote letters from prison expressing disturbing thoughts about JonBenét. When investigators finally compared his DNA to the unknown profile, however, he was excluded as the source. Michael Helgoth, a young man who worked at a salvage yard, died of an apparent suicide shortly after the murder, and some investigators believed his death might have been connected to the case. Helgoth owned boots that were potentially consistent with the footprints found in the basement. A friend reported that he had made comments shortly before his death, suggesting involvement in a crime for which he expected to receive money. A stun gun was found among his possessions, and some theorized that JonBenét had been subdued with such a weapon based on marks found on her body. However, the theory was never proven, and Helgoth's death closed off the possibility of direct interrogation. Bill McReynolds, who had played Santa Claus at a Christmas party the Ramseys attended. McReynolds had a background that included some troubling elements, and his wife had written a play involving a child's death in a basement. Both were eventually excluded through DNA testing, but the investigation consumed months and generated substantial speculation. John Mark Carr, a former teacher with a disturbing obsession with the case, confessed to the murder in 2006, claiming that he had been present in the Ramsey home that night and that JonBenét's death had been an accident. Carr was arrested in Thailand, where he had been teaching, and was extradited to Colorado amid a media frenzy. His confession was quickly discredited when DNA evidence excluded him as a contributor to the unknown male profile, and further investigation revealed that he had not even been in Colorado at the time of the murder. Carr's confession appeared to be a fantasy. Gary Howard Oliva, who should not be confused with Gary Oliva mentioned earlier, was another sex offender who came under scrutiny. The investigation cast a wide net, examining anyone with a history of crimes against children who might have been in the Boulder area at the relevant time. Most were eliminated through alibi or DNA testing. The house itself attracted attention. The previous owners were questioned about their time there, about any unusual features or hiding places that might be relevant. Workmen who had done repairs or renovations were tracked down and interviewed. Housekeepers, babysitters, anyone who had legitimate access to the home came under suspicion and then was eliminated. Each of these leads and dozens of others ultimately went nowhere. The investigation expanded to include interviews with more than 1,000 people across 19 states and 2 foreign countries. More than 21,000 tips were received and evaluated. Hundreds of DNA samples were collected, and compared to the unknown profile. Yet the case remained stubbornly unsolved, a mystery that seemed to resist every attempt at resolution. Lou Smit was perhaps the most significant investigator to champion the intruder theory. A retired detective from Colorado Springs, with decades of experience in homicide investigations, including the successful prosecution of numerous murder cases, Smit was brought out of retirement to work on the Ramsey case in March 1997. He came with impeccable credentials and a reputation for thoroughness and integrity. Smit arrived at the case without preconceptions, determined to follow the evidence wherever it led. What he found troubled him. The more he examined the physical evidence, the more convinced he became that an intruder had committed the crime. He documented his findings meticulously, creating a database of hundreds of names and pieces of evidence that he believed warranted further investigation. He photographed the basement window and demonstrated how an adult could fit through it. He analyzed the marks on JonBenét's body and argued they were consistent with a stun gun. He identified the basement window as a likely entry point and argued that the evidence of an intruder had been overlooked or dismissed by investigators who had already made up their minds about the family's guilt. The police, he believed, had developed tunnel vision, focusing so intently on the Ramseys that they had failed to pursue other leads with appropriate vigor. Smit resigned from the case in September 1998, frustrated by what he saw as the district attorney's office's unwillingness to pursue leads that pointed toward an outside perpetrator. His resignation letter was passionate and detailed, laying out his reasons for believing that the family was innocent and that the real killer remained at large. The letter was later made public and became a key document in the ongoing debate about the case. He spent the remaining years of his life working on the case privately, convinced that the truth was findable if only investigators would look in the right direction. He identified potential suspects, collected DNA samples where possible, and maintained his database of evidence. When his health began to fail, he made a video presentation of his findings, determined that his work would not die with him. Lou Smit died in 2010 at the age of 75, having never seen the resolution he had worked so hard to achieve. On his deathbed, he reportedly told family members that JonBenét's case was the most important of his career. His final words on the subject were an admonition to keep investigating. But his work has continued through his daughter Cindy Mara, who has carried on her father's mission, working with a small team of retired investigators to eliminate suspects from his original list through DNA comparison. The technological advances of the past decade have brought new hope to those seeking answers in the Ramsey case. Genetic genealogy, the technique that was used to identify the Golden State Killer in 2018, after decades of investigative dead ends, offers the possibility of identifying the source of the unknown male DNA, even if that person is not in any criminal database. The process is complex, but has proven remarkably effective in cold cases. Investigators upload a DNA profile to public genealogy databases, where millions of people have voluntarily submitted their own genetic information in hopes of learning about their ancestry and finding relatives. Because family members share portions of their DNA, it is often possible to identify distant cousins or other relatives of an unknown person. From there, traditional genealogical research, building family trees, and examining historical records can narrow down the pool of possible matches until a specific individual can be identified. This technology has been used to solve dozens of cold cases that had seemed utterly unsolvable. In many instances, the identified perpetrators were people who had never been on any suspect list, individuals who had committed their crimes and then returned to normal lives, secure in the belief that they would never be caught. Genetic genealogy changed that calculation fundamentally, creating the possibility that any crime leaving DNA evidence could eventually be solved as long as the perpetrator had relatives in public databases. John Ramsey has been advocating for genetic genealogy testing in his daughter's case for years. He has met repeatedly with investigators and law enforcement officials, pushing for the evidence to be submitted for analysis, arguing that this technology represents the best hope for finally identifying JonBenét's killer. In January of 2025, he met with Boulder Police Chief Stephen Redfearn and came away from that meeting feeling more optimistic than he had in years about the possibility of resolution. According to reports from September 2025, dozens of items of evidence are currently being tested by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The collaboration involves multiple agencies, including the FBI and private labs, specializing in different types of DNA analysis. The investigation has never officially gone cold, and the recent attention appears to have reinvigorated efforts to find answers. Evidence has been sent to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation for additional testing, and the investigation, according to all involved parties, remains active and ongoing. Yet there are complexities to the DNA evidence that make the path forward uncertain. The unknown male profile was found mixed with JonBenét's own DNA, creating what experts call a mixture sample that is more difficult to analyze and interpret. When DNA from two individuals is combined, particularly in small quantities, separating the profiles becomes challenging. Modern technology has improved the ability to work with mixture samples, but significant limitations remain. Some of the DNA may have been the result of contamination during the manufacturing of the clothing. Studies have shown that trace amounts of DNA can be transferred to clothing during the manufacturing process, from factory workers who handle the garments or from other sources in the production environment. This possibility has led some investigators to question whether the unknown male DNA represents the killer at all, or whether it is simply an innocent artifact of the production process. The question of whether the unknown male DNA came from JonBenét's killer or from some innocent source, such as a factory worker who handled the garments before they were purchased, remains a matter of dispute among experts. Those who believe in the intruder theory argue that the DNA was found in locations consistent with it being left during the commission of the crime. Those who remain suspicious of the family suggest that the DNA could be explained by innocent transfer. Former Denver District Attorney Mitch Morrissey, who worked on the Ramsey case and is now involved in cold case DNA analysis through his work with United Data Connect, has cautioned against premature optimism about what genetic genealogy can achieve in this specific instance. In October 2025, he explained to CBS Colorado that the mixture sample presents challenges that current technology may not be able to overcome. The DNA in JonBenét's underwear, he noted, is approximately a 50-50 mixture of her DNA and the unknown male's DNA, and the technology to reliably sequence and identify individuals from such a mixture is not yet fully developed. There are labs that will attempt the analysis for a fee, Morrissey acknowledged, offering to give it a shot if investigators provide the sample and sufficient funding. But he has cautioned against rushing into testing that might not succeed. The evidence that exists cannot be replaced if it is consumed in unsuccessful testing. The DNA is a limited resource, and once it is used up, there is no way to get more. The risk of wasting this precious evidence on techniques that are not yet sufficiently advanced is real, and Morrissey has urged patience while the technology continues to develop. Anyone who has followed a cold case investigation knows the particular rhythm of hope and disappointment that characterizes such endeavors. There are moments when a breakthrough seems imminent, when new evidence or new technology promises to finally unlock the mystery. And then there are the long stretches when nothing happens, when the case seems to have reached another dead end, when the possibility of resolution feels more distant than ever. The Ramsey case has gone through many such cycles over the past 28 years, and those closest to it have learned to temper their expectations even as they continue to push for answers. The case file itself has become massive over the decades. According to Boulder Police, the investigation has generated nearly 40,000 reports, with more than 1 million pages of documentation. More than 21,000 tips have been received and evaluated. Over 1,000 interviews have been conducted across 17 states and 2 foreign countries. Samples from more than 200 individuals, including handwriting, DNA, fingerprints, and shoe prints, have been collected and compared to the evidence from the crime scene. The evidence inventory includes nearly 2,500 individual pieces of physical material, each cataloged and preserved in case it might someday prove relevant. In December 2023, the Boulder Police Department convened a cold case review panel to examine the investigation with fresh eyes. The panel included representatives from multiple agencies, including the FBI, the District Attorney's Office, the Colorado Department of Public Safety, and the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. For a year, they reviewed the evidence, evaluated the investigative strategies that had been employed, and developed recommendations for future efforts. The specific recommendations remain confidential to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation, but authorities have said they are committed to following up on them. John Ramsey, who had been critical of the Boulder Police Department for years, began to express cautious optimism after meeting with the new leadership. In January 2025, he sat down with Police Chief Stephen Redfearn and came away feeling more confident than he had since the investigation began. He told reporters that he believed the department was finally committed to using all available resources and technology to identify his daughter's killer. The change in tone was notable for a man who had publicly stated in 2022 that he did not believe the case would ever be solved as long as it remained in Boulder's hands. The town of Boulder has changed significantly since 1996. The population has grown. New buildings have risen. The character of certain neighborhoods has evolved. The house on 15th Street where JonBenét lived and died still stands, though it has changed hands several times and has been renovated by subsequent owners. People who live nearby say that tourists sometimes still stop to take photographs, drawn by the macabre appeal of a site associated with such a famous tragedy. The current owners, by all accounts, simply want to live their lives in peace. The cultural moment of the mid-1990 seconds, when 24-hour cable news was coming into its own, and the public appetite for true crime stories was being discovered and exploited, shaped the way the Ramsey case was covered and perceived. The imagery of JonBenét in her pageant costumes, with her elaborate hairstyles and makeup, became iconic in a way that troubled many observers. There were questions about the appropriateness of child beauty pageants, about the sexualization of young girls, about what kind of pressures were being placed on children who participated in such activities. JonBenét became a symbol of something larger than herself, a focal point for cultural anxieties that extended far beyond the specific facts of her life and death. The pageant photographs, reproduced endlessly in newspapers and on television screens, created an image of JonBenét that bore little resemblance to the everyday child her friends and teachers knew. In those photographs, she wore makeup, elaborate costumes, and hairstyles that transformed her into something almost otherworldly. A miniature adult, performing femininity for judges and audiences. The contrast between this constructed image and the reality of a 6-year-old who went to kindergarten and played with her friends became a source of discomfort for many Americans, raising questions that went beyond the specific circumstances of her death. Child beauty pageants, which had existed largely beneath the national radar before December 1996, suddenly became a subject of intense debate. Critics argued that they sexualized children, placed inappropriate pressure on young participants, and created environments that might attract predators. Defenders countered that pageants built confidence, taught poise and public speaking. The debate continues to this day, though the industry has never fully recovered from its association with the Ramsey case. The attention paid to the pageant photographs also raised questions about how victims of crime are portrayed in the media. By focusing so intently on JonBenét's pageant persona, the coverage arguably reduced her to a spectacle rather than treating her as a complete human being. The photographs became more famous than the child herself, creating a version of JonBenét that existed primarily for public consumption. Some critics argued that this treatment was itself a form of exploitation, a continuation of the objectification that had troubled them about the pageants in the first place. Patsy Ramsey, who died in 2006 at the age of 49, never escaped the shadow of suspicion that had fallen over her in the days following her daughter's murder. The handwriting analysis of the ransom note, while never conclusive, suggested that she could not be eliminated as its author, and this finding haunted her for the rest of her life. She maintained her innocence to the end, and her family continues to maintain it on her behalf. But the question of her involvement is one that will likely never be definitively answered. Patsy had been diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 1993 and had undergone treatment that appeared successful. For several years, she lived in remission, raising her children and participating in the social and charitable activities that occupied Boulder's upper class. The cancer returned in 2002, and she battled it for 4 more years before succumbing in June 2006. She was buried next to JonBenét in Marietta, Georgia, where the family had roots. In her final years, Patsy continued to proclaim her innocence and to push for continued investigation of her daughter's murder. She gave interviews, participated in documentaries, and worked with investigators who were pursuing the intruder theory. Those who knew her described a woman who was devastated not only by her daughter's death, but by the suspicion that had surrounded her from the moment the crime was discovered. The combination of grief and accusation seemed to define her life after December 1996, leaving little room for anything else. Her death meant that certain questions could never be answered. If Patsy had been involved in JonBenét's death, she took that knowledge to her grave. If she was innocent, as she always claimed, she died without seeing her name fully cleared or her daughter's killer brought to justice. The formal exoneration in 2008 came 2 years too late for Patsy to experience it, though her husband and surviving children welcomed it as long overdue vindication. Burke Ramsey, who was 9 years old when his sister was killed, grew up under circumstances that no child should have to endure. He was interviewed by investigators and psychologists in the aftermath of the murder, and while he was never publicly named as a suspect, various theories over the years have suggested that he might have been involved. In 2016, a television program made claims about Burke that he found defamatory. He has generally avoided the spotlight, living a private life that has been disrupted periodically by renewed media attention to the case. The theories about Burke emerged in the years following the murder, proposed by amateur investigators and eventually by some media outlets seeking sensational angles on the case. The suggestion was that Burke had somehow been responsible for his sister's death. These theories pointed to various pieces of evidence, including statements Burke allegedly made to investigators and physical evidence that was interpreted as pointing toward him. Burke's defenders have consistently pointed out that he was thoroughly investigated at the time, that child psychologists who interviewed him found no indication of guilt, and that no credible evidence has ever connected him to his sister's death. The 2008 exoneration specifically included Burke, clearing all family members based on the DNA evidence. Yet the theories persist, fueled by internet speculation and the appetite for novel explanations of a case that has resisted resolution. In 2016, Burke gave his first television interview, appearing on Dr. Phil to discuss the case and respond to the accusations that had followed him throughout his adult life. The interview was controversial, with some viewers finding his demeanor inappropriate and others defending him as someone who had never been taught how to handle the spotlight that was thrust upon him. His lawsuit against CBS over their documentary about the case resulted in a settlement reported to be substantial, though the exact terms were not disclosed. The experience of the Ramsey children underscores the broader damage that unsolved cases inflict on families. It is not only the immediate grief of losing a loved one, but the ongoing trauma of suspicion, media attention, and public speculation that can extend for decades. Burke Ramsey has spent nearly 30 years living with questions about his role in his sister's death. The forensic evidence in the Ramsey case has been analyzed and reanalyzed, debated and disputed for nearly 3 decades. The broken paintbrush used in the construction of the garrote came from Patsy Ramsey's art supply kit. The cord used to strangle JonBenét and bind her wrists has never been traced to a specific source. The duct tape found on her mouth was apparently brought to the scene by the perpetrator and then removed, as the rest of the roll was never found in the house. These details have been used to support both the intruder theory and the family involvement theory. The pineapple found in JonBenét's digestive system during the autopsy became another point of contention. A bowl of pineapple was found on the kitchen table, with Burke's and Patsy's fingerprints on the bowl and spoon. The Ramseys initially said they had not given JonBenét pineapple that night, but the presence of the fruit in her system suggested she had eaten it sometime between returning home from the party and her death. This detail has been interpreted variously, as evidence of an intruder luring JonBenét downstairs, as evidence of a family interaction that preceded the crime, or as simply an unremarkable snack that has no bearing on what happened. The flashlight found on the kitchen counter attracted attention because some investigators believed it could have been the weapon that caused JonBenét's skull fracture. Tests on the flashlight found no blood or tissue, but it had been wiped clean, suggesting someone had taken care to remove any evidence it might have contained. The weight and shape of the flashlight were consistent with the injury pattern. The Ramseys said the flashlight was theirs, but could not explain why it was on the counter or why it appeared to have been cleaned. The stun gun theory, championed by Lou Smith and others who supported the intruder scenario, proposed that JonBenét had been subdued with an electric shock before being killed. This theory was based on marks found on her body that some experts believed were consistent with stun gun prongs. Other experts disputed this interpretation, arguing that the marks could have been caused by other means. No stun gun was ever found, and the debate over whether one was used remains unresolved. The timeline of events on the night of December 25th and the morning of December 26th has been reconstructed many times, with different investigators reaching different conclusions. The window of time during which the murder could have occurred, the sequence of injuries JonBenét sustained, the question of whether she was killed quickly or subjected to a prolonged ordeal, All of these matters remain subjects of expert disagreement. The degradation of the crime scene in the hours after the body was discovered makes definitive reconstruction impossible. Forensic pathologists who have examined the autopsy findings have offered varying interpretations of what the physical evidence reveals. Some believe that JonBenét was first struck on the head, rendering her unconscious, and then strangled sometime later. This timeline suggests a crime that unfolded over an extended period, which some find inconsistent with an intruder scenario. Others argue that the injuries could have occurred in quick succession, consistent with a violent attack by someone who entered the home with the intent to harm. The garrote itself has been the subject of intense analysis. The device was constructed from a broken paintbrush handle and a length of cord, fashioned into a tourniquet that tightened around JonBenét's neck when the handle was twisted. Some experts have argued that this was a sophisticated weapon that demonstrated premeditation and perhaps familiarity with certain practices. Others have suggested it was a crude improvisation. The paintbrush came from Patsy Ramsey's art supplies, which were stored in a tray near the basement room where JonBenét was found. The cord, however, has never been traced to any source within the house. What we know with certainty is limited but undeniable. A 6-year-old girl was killed in her own home on Christmas night. Her body was hidden in the basement while her mother called police to report a kidnapping. A ransom note was written on materials from inside the house, demanding a specific sum of money that was never collected. DNA from an unknown male was found on the victim's body. No one has ever been charged with the crime. These facts form the skeleton of the case, the framework around which all theories and speculations must be constructed. There are those who believe that the truth is knowable, that somewhere in the thousands of pages of investigative files, in the hundreds of interviews, in the physical evidence that has been preserved and tested, lies the answer to what happened to JonBenét Ramsey. They believe that advances in technology will eventually unlock the mystery, that genetic genealogy, or some other breakthrough, will finally identify the perpetrator. This view is held most strongly by John Ramsey himself, who has dedicated much of his life since 1996 to pushing for continued investigation. There are others who believe that the case is effectively unsolvable. They note that memories fade, witnesses die, physical evidence degrades, and the possibility of a successful prosecution becomes more remote with each passing year. Even if the unknown male DNA could be matched to a specific individual, proving that person's presence in the Ramsey home on that specific night, proving that they committed the murder, would be extraordinarily difficult after nearly 3 decades. And there are those who believe that the answers are already known, that investigators identified the perpetrator long ago, but lack the evidence to prove it in court. This view encompasses both those who believe the family was responsible and those who believe a specific intruder committed the crime. For these observers, the mystery is not really a mystery at all, but rather a failure of the justice system to hold the guilty accountable. The Netflix documentary series that premiered in November 2024, titled Cold Case: Who Killed JonBenét Ramsey, brought renewed attention to the case, introducing it to a generation that was not yet born when JonBenét died. The 3-part series examined the investigation from multiple angles, interviewing John Ramsey at length and presenting evidence that supports the intruder theory, while also acknowledging the questions that remain about the family's involvement. It featured footage never before seen by the public, interviews with investigators who worked the case, and expert analysis of the evidence. The documentary was sharply critical of the Boulder Police Department's handling of the investigation, particularly in the early hours and days after the murder. It highlighted the failure to secure the crime scene, the decision not to separate the family members for individual interviews, and what it characterized as tunnel vision that focused on the Ramseys to the exclusion of other possibilities. John Ramsey, in his interviews for the series, expressed decades of frustration, describing what he saw as a bungled investigation that allowed his daughter's killer to escape justice. The series renewed public interest in a case that had never fully faded from the national consciousness. It trended on Netflix for weeks after its release, prompting discussions on social media and generating new tips to investigators. For many younger viewers, it was their first substantial exposure to the details of the Ramsey case, and the response suggested that public fascination with the mystery remained strong even after nearly 3 decades. Boulder police responded to the documentary with a statement emphasizing their continued commitment to solving the case. Chief Redfern released a video message one day after the premiere, acknowledging the pain the case has caused and expressing determination to bring the killer to justice. The department pushed back on some specific claims made in the series, including John Ramsey's statement that 5 or 6 items from the crime scene had never been properly tested for DNA. According to police, all evidence had been appropriately processed, though they declined to provide details about ongoing investigative efforts. In September 2025, John Ramsey appeared at CrimeCon 2025 Inches, Denver, an annual conference that brings together true crime enthusiasts, investigators, and families of victims. He shared updates about the investigation, telling attendees that dozens of items were currently being tested by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. The conference provided a platform for Ramsey to continue advocating for the use of genetic genealogy and other advanced techniques, and his appearance generated significant media coverage. Boulder District Attorney Michael Dougherty has spoken publicly about the challenges of the case, acknowledging both the desire for resolution and the evidentiary hurdles that remain. His office has successfully prosecuted other cold case homicides and numerous murder cases over the years, but always with sufficient evidence to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. Whether that threshold can be met in the Ramsey case remains uncertain. Boulder Police Chief Stephen Redfern has spoken about the department's commitment to solving the case, acknowledging the pain it has caused to the community and the ongoing grief of those who love JonBenét. The department has collaborated with the FBI, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and private labs in the effort to extract new information from the evidence. Whether these efforts will succeed where previous investigations have failed remains to be seen. In a sense, JonBenét Ramsey has never been allowed to rest. Her image, frozen at age 6, has been reproduced countless times in documentaries, news reports, magazine articles, and books. Her death has been the subject of academic papers, psychological analyses, and endless amateur theorizing on the internet. She has become less a person than a symbol, a victim whose suffering has been commodified and consumed by a public that cannot look away from tragedy. This is perhaps the cruelest aspect of famous unsolved cases, the way they transform real human beings into characters in a never-ending story, stripped of the complexity and dignity that belong to them in life. JonBenét was a real child who liked Shirley Temple movies and chocolate chip cookies and playing with her friends. She had a laugh and a voice and thoughts and feelings that are known only to those who knew her. She was not defined by the way she died, though that is how the world has come to know her. The tragedy of her death is compounded by the tragedy of her reduction. The way a life that should have been long and rich and varied was cut short and then further diminished by its transformation into entertainment. Those who seek to understand this case must grapple with the uncomfortable reality that our fascination with it has contributed to something troubling. Every documentary, every book, Every podcast episode, every online discussion participates in a form of consumption that turns human tragedy into content. The line between seeking justice and seeking entertainment can blur, and those who follow cases like this one must ask themselves difficult questions about their own motivations and the ethics of true crime as a genre. And yet there is also something valuable in the refusal to forget. The families of murder victims often speak about the importance of keeping cases alive in the public consciousness, of ensuring that the dead are remembered. Jon Ramsey has welcomed media attention to his daughter's case, seeing it as a tool that might ultimately help identify her killer. The daughter of Lou Smith has continued her father's work in part because she believes that public interest can translate into resources and leads that might otherwise never materialize. The passage of time changes the character of such cases in ways that are both obvious and subtle. Witnesses age and die. Memories fade and become unreliable. Physical evidence degrades, despite the best preservation efforts. But time also brings new technology, new investigative techniques, new possibilities that did not exist when the crime was committed. The genetic genealogy revolution of the past decade has solved cases that were considered permanently cold, identifying killers who thought they had gotten away with their crimes decades earlier. Her father carries her photograph on his phone, a reminder of what was lost and of what he continues to fight for. He is 80 years old now, and he has said that he wants to see the case solved in his lifetime, wants to know who took his daughter from him on that Christmas night so long ago. Whether he will get that closure is uncertain. The arc of justice, as has often been observed, is long. Jon Ramsey's life since 1996 has been shaped entirely by what happened in that house on 15th Street. He lost not only his daughter but also, in a sense, his place in the world. The successful businessman became the grieving father under perpetual suspicion. His marriage to Patsy, already tested by her earlier battle with ovarian cancer, endured until her death in 2006. But both of them lived under a cloud that never fully lifted. He has remarried and has tried to build a life beyond the tragedy. His advocacy has taken many forms over the years. He has met with police chiefs, district attorneys, governors, and anyone else who might be able to advance the investigation. He has hired private investigators and DNA experts. He has submitted to interviews and documentaries, using media attention as a tool to keep pressure on law enforcement. He has pushed for legislative changes that would give families of crime victims more access to evidence and more input into how investigations are conducted. In his interviews, Ramsey often returns to certain themes. He speaks about the mistakes made in the early hours of the investigation, the failure to properly secure the crime scene, the focus on the family that he believes allowed the real killer to escape. He talks about the unknown male DNA as proof that someone else was in the house that night. He expresses frustration that more advanced testing has not been conducted and hope that genetic genealogy will finally provide the breakthrough that has eluded investigators for so long. He has also spoken about what it means to live under suspicion for nearly 3 decades. The internet has kept theories about the family alive, allowing anyone with an opinion to broadcast it to the world. Ramsey has described the experience as a kind of ongoing persecution, a punishment for a crime he insists he did not commit. The formal exoneration in 2008, while welcome, did not silence the amateur investigators or the cable news commentators who continue to speculate about what really happened in that house. His children, too, have been affected in ways that are difficult to measure. Burke Ramsey was just 9 years old when his sister was killed, and he has spent his entire adult life under the same cloud of suspicion that surrounded his parents. John Andrew Ramsey, John's son from his first marriage, has joined his father in advocating for continued investigation and has spoken publicly about the toll the case has taken on the family. The house on 15th Street stands quiet now, as it did on the morning of December 26, 1996, when the world had not yet learned what had happened inside its walls. The mountains rise to the west, unchanged by the passage of years. The seasons turn, winter giving way to spring and then summer and fall and then winter again. Children grow up in Boulder, go to school, ride their bicycles through neighborhoods that feel safe and welcoming. Life continues as it always does, even in the shadow of tragedy. But there are some who remember, who cannot forget, who continue to ask questions that have no answers. They study the evidence, propose theories, argue with each other in online forums and at conferences dedicated to unsolved cases. They believe that somewhere in some piece of overlooked evidence, in some DNA profile that has not yet been compared, in some witness who has not yet come forward, lies the key to understanding what happened to JonBenét Ramsey. They refuse to let the case become cold, refuse to accept that some mysteries are simply beyond solving. Perhaps they are right. Perhaps the advances in genetic genealogy will prove sufficient to identify the unknown male whose DNA was found at the scene. Perhaps that identification will lead to other evidence, to witnesses who can place that person in Boulder at the time, to confessions or other proof that will finally bring the case to resolution. Perhaps John Ramsey will live to see his daughter's killer identified and held accountable, or perhaps the case will remain forever unsolved. Another name on the long list of mysteries that the justice system has failed to resolve. Perhaps the questions will outlast all those who currently ask them, passed down to future generations, who will approach the case with fresh eyes, but the same fundamental limitations. Perhaps JonBenét's death will become, like so many others, a cautionary tale without a conclusion. A reminder that evil sometimes escapes justice, and that the truth is not always findable no matter how hard we search. What can be said with certainty is that the search continues. Investigators are still working the case, still following leads. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation has dozens of items currently under analysis. John Ramsey meets with police officials, advocates for additional testing, keeps his daughter's memory alive through his refusal to give up. The daughter of Lou Smith continues her father's work, methodically eliminating suspects through DNA comparison, determined to honor his dying wish that the case not be forgotten. Cindy Mara's work represents a remarkable effort to keep the intruder theory investigation alive. Working from her father's database of over 600 names and pieces of evidence, she and her team of retired investigators have been systematically tracking down potential suspects and collecting DNA samples for comparison. They have eliminated approximately 25 people from Lou Smith's original list through DNA testing, a painstaking process that requires locating individuals, obtaining samples, and comparing them to the unknown male profile. The work is largely self-funded, supplemented by contributions from supporters who believe in the intruder theory. Mara has created a GoFundMe page to help cover the costs of DNA testing and investigation, and she has spoken publicly about the financial challenges of conducting a private investigation that should properly be the responsibility of law enforcement. Her relationship with the Boulder Police Department has been complicated, with investigators telling her from the beginning that information sharing would be a one-way street. Despite these challenges, Mara remains committed to her father's mission. She believes that a break in the case could come at any moment, that somewhere among the names on Lou Smith's spreadsheet is the person responsible for JonBenét's death. The Netflix documentary generated new leads that her team is following up on, and she has expressed hope that recent developments might finally bring the resolution her father worked so hard to achieve. John Anderson, a retired Colorado Springs homicide detective who worked with Lou Smit for many years, is part of Mara's team. He has spoken about the frustration of knowing that the Boulder Police Department has resources and information that the private investigators do not, and the difficulty of conducting an effective investigation without full access to the case file. Despite these limitations, the team continues its work, driven by the same conviction that motivated Lou Smit until his death. Nearly 3 decades have passed since a 6-year-old girl was killed in her Boulder home on Christmas night. Her name was JonBenét Patricia Ramsey. Whatever happened in that house, whoever was responsible, the fundamental fact of her death remains a wound that has never healed, not for her family, not for the community that failed to protect her, not for a nation that became obsessed with her story. The investigation continues. The questions remain, and somewhere perhaps someone knows the truth about what happened that night, carries that knowledge as a burden or a secret, lives with the awareness of what they did, or what they witnessed, or what they know. The hope of those who seek justice is that this person will eventually be identified through DNA evidence or investigative work, or the simple passage of time that sometimes loosens tongues and brings hidden things to light. The psychology of cold cases suggests that confessions sometimes emerge decades after crimes are committed. People who have carried guilty secrets for years may find them unbearable as they age, as they face mortality. Family members or friends who have protected perpetrators sometimes come forward after death, removes the obligation of loyalty. Evidence surfaces in unexpected places, found during estate cleanings or home renovations or the processing of old files. Each of these possibilities offers a slender thread of hope for those who want to see the Ramsey case resolved. Someone might confess. Someone might come forward with information they have kept secret. The probability of any individual possibility may be small, but the cumulative probability across all of them suggests that resolution remains possible, if not certain. The alternative is permanent uncertainty, a mystery that outlasts all those who currently seek to solve it. In a century when everyone who knew JonBenét is gone, when the investigators and the journalists and the amateur sleuths have all passed away, the case will still exist in archives and databases, available to future researchers who may bring perspectives and technologies that we cannot imagine. The question of what happened in that Boulder home on Christmas night, 1996, may remain open indefinitely, a puzzle that humanity never quite manages to solve. For John Ramsey, now 80 years old, the clock is running. He has said that he wants to see his daughter's killer identified before he dies, wants to close the chapter that has defined his life for nearly 30 years. Whether that wish will be granted is uncertain. He continues to push for advanced DNA testing, continues to meet with law enforcement, continues to use whatever platform is available to advocate for the resolution he seeks. His determination has not wavered, even as the years have accumulated and the likelihood of a breakthrough has remained frustratingly unclear. Until that day comes, if it ever does, the case of JonBenét Ramsey will remain what it has been for nearly 30 years, a mystery that haunts everyone it touches, a reminder of the limits of justice. The case has become a touchstone in discussions of how America handles violent crime, how the media covers tragedy, and how the criminal justice system can fail even when resources and attention are abundant. It has prompted reforms in how police departments handle crime scenes, how DNA evidence is collected and preserved, and how families of victims are treated during investigations. The lessons of the Ramsey case have been taught in police academies and journalism schools, studied by researchers and practitioners who hope to prevent similar failures in the future. In Boulder, the case remains a wound that has never fully healed. Longtime residents remember where they were when they heard the news. Remember the shock of learning that something so terrible could happen in their community. The house on 15th Street, despite its changes of ownership and renovation, carries an aura that sets it apart from its neighbors. The city has grown and evolved, but the shadow of December 1996 remains. For the true crime community, the Ramsey case occupies a special place. It was one of the first cases to be dissected obsessively on the early internet, with forums and websites dedicated to analyzing every piece of evidence and proposing theories about what happened. That tradition continues today, with new generations of amateur investigators examining the case through podcasts and social media. The volume of material produced about JonBenét's death is staggering, and it continues to grow. Whether this attention helps or hinders the pursuit of justice is a question without a clear answer. On one hand, public interest has kept pressure on law enforcement to continue investigating, has generated tips that might otherwise never have been received, and has helped preserve the memory of a child who deserved better. On the other hand, the circus of speculation and accusation has complicated the investigation and has transformed a family tragedy into a form of entertainment that sometimes seems to forget the human beings at its center. The truth of what happened on Christmas night 1996 exists somewhere. Either an intruder entered the Ramsey home and killed JonBenét, or someone inside that house was responsible for her death. There are no other possibilities. The evidence points in both directions, and the passage of nearly 3 decades has not resolved the fundamental ambiguity at the heart of the case. If there is a case that deserves to be told, a story of injustice or mystery that has stayed with you, perhaps you will share it. There are many such cases, many such stories, and each of them represents a person whose life and death deserve to be remembered. In the telling, we keep faith with those who can no longer speak for themselves, and we reaffirm our commitment to the pursuit of truth, however elusive it may sometimes be.